Have you ever wondered if the exhausting effort you pour into a relationship, the constant struggle that seems to drain your very soul, isn't actually a silent plea from the universe, or perhaps a divine whisper begging you to stop? What if the pain you carry isn't a test of your faith, but a clear signal that you are swimming against an invisible tide, ignoring the profound warnings that life and God Himself are trying to send you? How often have we mistaken love for limitless sacrifice and loyalty for a self-imposed prison where the only escape seems to be giving up on ourselves? Society teaches us to fight, to never give up, to believe that every obstacle is a testament to our love. But what if this belief is the most subtle trap, the veil that prevents you from seeing a liberating truth? There is a fine line between perseverance and self-destruction, a point where persistence turns into blind stubbornness and hope becomes a cruel illusion. What happens when the path you insist on walking is not your own, but a road that takes you further from your essence, your peace, and your connection to the sacred? Imagine for a moment that the divine, in its infinite wisdom, does not want to see you suffer in vain. Instead, it sends coded messages, subtle or resounding signs, that point toward a necessary conclusion. They are like lighthouses in the midst of a storm, glimpses of a reality where happiness doesn't demand your total depletion, where wholeness is not built upon emotional ruins. But how do you decipher these signs? How do you distinguish the voice of persistence from the voice of liberation when your heart insists on clinging to what no longer serves you? Prepare to immerse yourself in a universe of revelations that can unlock the secrets behind seemingly impossible relationships. It's time to understand that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the greatest act of faith is knowing when to let go. If you feel there is something more, a hidden truth waiting to be discovered, and you are ready to unveil the signs God might be showing you, make sure this channel is your guide. Subscribe now, activate your notifications, and don't miss a second of this transformative journey, because what you are about to discover could forever change the way you see love and your own life. How many times do we cling to a promise, to a glimpse of how it should be, while our reality screams a different truth, a discordant melody that echoes relentlessly in our chest? It feels like trying to hold sand in your fist. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away, a silent struggle against the inevitable that wears down not just the soul, but our very faith in a brighter future. We are told that true love endures all things, but we forget that it never demands the erasure of who we are, nor does it require constant pain as proof of its existence. And in this tangle of expectations and disappointments, a question arises that few dare to ask. Could the Creator Himself, in His infinite mercy, be whispering to us from within, speaking through a weariness that goes beyond the physical, telling us that this path is not ours to walk? It's the feeling of being in a desert, searching for water in a dry well, while the spring of life is waiting to be found elsewhere. This profound exhaustion isn't a punishment, but perhaps an urgent invitation to reassess your direction, to listen to a voice that transcends human logic. Think of the signs that manifest not in spoken words, but in deafening silences, in voids that no presence can fill, in a loneliness that deepens even when you are with someone. These are the small fractures in the fabric of your patience, the cracks in the wall of your hope, indicating that something fundamental is giving way. It's the strength that fades, the joy that becomes a distant memory, the peace that feels like an unattainable luxury. These are not mere whims of fate, but echoes of a greater truth, reverberating through your very being. What do you do when your prayers become a repetitive lament, and the only answer seems to be another cycle of pain and frustration? Could it be that God, in His wisdom, is using the difficulty itself as a mirror, reflecting the need for an internal shift or release that begins with the courage to let go? This isn't about giving up on love, but about discerning where love can genuinely flourish, without needing to be watered with tears and sacrifices that deplete rather than nourish it. This is an invitation to look inward, at the wounds that refuse to heal, the memories that trigger the same ache, and the inner voice that is crying out for a breath of fresh air. The universe, and the divine that permeates it, communicates in ways that go beyond the obvious, through intuition, through persistent discomfort, through that gut feeling that something is fundamentally wrong. And it is at this breaking point, on the threshold between hanging on and surrendering, that a true revelation can finally emerge, showing that not all that glitters is gold, and not every fight is a proof of love. Often, In our human stubbornness, we try to fix what is already broken, insisting on weaving threads of hope into a fabric that unravels with every touch. But what if the greatest wisdom isn't in mending, but in recognizing that some things were never meant to be whole in our hands? There is a voice, a divine whisper, that manifests not in thunder, but in the absence of peace, in that emptiness no company can fill, in a silence that screams louder than any argument. The signs that God is showing you it's not worth it rarely come as neon signs or vivid dreams. They appear as a fatigue that a night's sleep cannot cure, a sadness that the joy of others cannot dispel, a feeling that you are constantly giving more than you receive until your own essence is depleted. It's like trying to light a fire with damp wood. The effort is immense, the smoke is suffocating, and any warmth that appears is fleeting and insufficient to warm your soul. Consider the doors that close, not by chance, but by a greater design. The barriers that arise, not to punish, but to redirect. How many times have you faced insurmountable obstacles, conversations that go nowhere, and hearts that seem sealed, no matter how hard you try to open them? This resistance may not be a challenge to be overcome at all costs, but rather the very hand of God, gently or firmly, pushing you off a path that will not lead you to the fullness He has reserved for you. True peace, the kind that transcends all understanding, cannot coexist with constant warfare. If your relationship has become a battlefield where exhaustion is the only victory, where joy is a rare visitor and sorrow is a permanent resident, you must question the source of your persistence. God is a God of order, love, and peace. Where there is persistent chaos, veiled manipulation, or a constant feeling of being diminished, the divine presence cannot fully flourish, and your soul will inevitably wither. This isn't about cowardice or quitting, but about discernment and courage. The courage to recognize that your peace is worth more than anyone's approval, more than maintaining a facade. It is the faith that there is a greater plan, a purpose that does not require the sacrifice of your essence. The signs are there in every tear you don't shed in public, in every stifled sigh, in every time you find yourself dreaming of a freedom that seems so far away. Listen, feel, because sometimes the greatest proof of self-love and faith is knowing when it's time to release the anchors and let the divine wind guide you to a new horizon. There comes a tipping point, an invisible threshold where hope transforms into exhaustion and faith becomes a heavy burden. Have you felt that unsettling stillness, as if the heavens are silent not out of absence, but with a message you refuse to hear? It happens when prayer becomes a lonely echo, and the answer you seek comes not in words, but in the very lack of peace, in the persistence of a knot that only tightens with each attempt to undo it. As Scripture says, there is a time for everything, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. Ecclesiastes 3, says, perhaps the time for holding on has ended, giving way to the time for letting go. Often, the signs are not dramatic, but are revealed in the subtle erosion of your joy, the gradual loss of your own identity within the relationship. It's when the light you once radiated begins to dim, and the vitality that pulsed through you turns into a chronic fatigue, a soul-deep weariness that no amount of physical rest can cure. Where is the peace that should be the anchor for your soul? If it has vanished, if your spirit feels constantly oppressed and your faith is wavering, perhaps the Holy Spirit is guiding you away from barren ground where nothing more can grow. Think of the repeating cycles, the same arguments that return like a bitter refrain, the broken promises that pile up like rubble on your path. It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand. No matter how hard you work to raise the walls, the foundation gives way, and everything collapses again. This pattern is not a test of your resilience, but a divine warning, an insistence from the universe to show you that the structure cannot bear the weight of your devotion. God does not want you to live in a loop of pain, but to find the freedom that comes from acknowledging the truth. The voice of God sometimes manifests through persistent discomfort, that gut feeling that something is fundamentally wrong, even when everyone around you says to hang in there. This is your intuition, your sixth sense, the inexpressible groaning of your own spirit yearning for release. When the other person's presence becomes a weight, when your energy is drained, and your joy feels like an act of survival. These are divine whispers showing you that the road ahead is not what He planned for your flourishing. If you feel lost and need guidance, the Bible invites you to ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. James 1-5. This is not about finding someone to blame, but about recognizing the invisible hand trying to guide you to a place of healing and renewal. True strength lies not in enduring the unendurable, but in having the courage to read the signs and discern the voice calling you out of the storm and into a safe harbor. It is the faith that your release, however painful it may seem at first, is the first step toward a life where peace, joy, and a true divine connection can finally reside, free from the shadow of exhaustion and disillusionment. What happens when your own prayer, which should be a soothing balm, turns into a repetitive lament with no apparent echo or response? In that silence hides one of the most profound signs, the absence of a peace that was once yours. The sense that the divine presence feels distant not due to abandonment, but because of a blockage you insist on maintaining. If your heart is in turmoil when you think of this relationship, it may be a sign that something is not aligned with the greater plan. Think of the metaphor of a seed that won't sprout in infertile soil, no matter how much you water it with tears and hope. One of the clearest signs is emotional sterility, a lack of growth, a stagnation that settles in and refuses to yield. It's when the other person shows no reciprocity, when your efforts are consistently devalued, or when your voice is silenced, preventing any mutual evolution. You feel like a river trying to flow uphill, exhausting yourself in a futile effort, never reaching the ocean of fulfillment. God's promise is not for barrenness, but for a rich future. Remember His words, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. If your current path feels harmful and hopeless, it may not be His plan. Another subtle and devastating sign is the loss of your own identity. You find yourself changing who you are, giving up your values, and silencing your truths to fit into a mold that isn't yours. It's as if your light is being dimmed, overshadowed by a relationship that demands your self-annihilation. Remember that you were created in the divine image, with a unique purpose. If this relationship pulls you away from who you are meant to be, stealing the joy of being yourself, that is a cry for liberation, a warning that your soul is in peril. And what about the constant need to justify, explain, and defend your pain to those who don't understand or refuse to see? When your reality becomes a burden you must carry alone, when empathy is absent and the loneliness deepens even in the other's presence, these are echoes of a truth that must be faced. It feels like you are the only soldier in a battle, fighting an invisible enemy while your energy drains away for nothing. The exhortation here is not to give up on love, but to discern where true love can thrive. It is an invitation to seek divine guidance, to kneel and ask for wisdom, so your eyes may be opened to the truth that sets you free. If God is showing you it's not worth insisting, He is actually guiding you toward a path of healing, peace, and a love that truly builds you up rather than tears you down. And so, we arrive at the threshold where the echo of our initial questions meets the clarity that only truth can bring. We have walked through the shadows of doubt, the pain of insistence, and the whispers of the divine, who, in infinite wisdom, guides us even when our eyes refuse to see. This is not an ending, but an awakening. The realization that every tear shed and all the weariness felt was not in vain, but a silent invitation to reevaluate what your heart truly deserves. The journey doesn't end here. It is simply redefined, revealing that the greatest act of love is sometimes the courage to let go. The seeds of truth have been planted, and now, in your inner silence, they begin to sprout. What once seemed like an unbearable burden, a pointless stubbornness, is now revealed as a gateway to your own liberation. You realize the signs, once veiled, were the very hand of God, gently or firmly, directing you toward a path of peace that surpasses all understanding. The pain was not a punishment, but a messenger, and the act of giving up, which once sounded like failure, now reveals itself as the most profound act of faith and self-love. This new perspective doesn't fade with the final frame of a video. It pulses, it resonates, and it integrates into your very essence. It's the feeling that a veil has been lifted, and reality now appears in more vibrant colors, with sharper outlines. The marks from the journey remain, yes, but not as scars of defeat. They are symbols of a newly acquired wisdom, of a strength you never knew you possessed. The secret, after all, was not in a complex answer, but in the simplicity of listening to the signs that the universe and the divine whisper to your heart. May this truth resonate in every fiber of your being, empowering you to seek the wholeness you are worthy of. If this deep dive into your soul has awakened a desire to continue uncovering life's mysteries, to find transcendent peace, and to connect with a community that seeks truth and transformation, then this is just the beginning. Hit the like button so this message can reach more hearts. Share it with someone who needs to hear these whispers. Comment with your own insights. And to ensure you don't miss a single step on this journey of self-discovery and faith, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. May your search for truth always be guided by divine light.